Hello and welcome everyone to the Rangers Journal. We have another great interview for you with Matt Maiocco, who's joining us very kindly again for his second interview. If you've seen the first one, it's very informative. We just had a couple of follow-up questions we wanted to give to Matt. So we hope you enjoy this interview as well, and welcome, Matt.
The Rangers Journal night.
Hello, Matt. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Billy, thanks for having me again. I guess I did well enough the first time that you wanted me back, huh?
You did so. In fact, it's our most popular video on YouTube. So you could say we were very keen to get you back. Yeah, the Rangers fans are desperate for some kind of good news. We've not had a good season, and it basically came to an end last night as we were knocked out of European competition. So we're really looking at something to give us some good news, Matt. And I know you are not involved in the day-to-day takeover investment type side of things, but we'd like to get a perspective of someone who at least is a bit closer than we are. So again, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And I think, if it has been a disappointing season for the Rangers, and there are several seasons leading up to that have been disappointing, I think that's probably part of the attractiveness for the 49ers and their investment arm, 49ers Enterprises, to see an opportunity there to turn around those fortunes and to invest and potentially, become the owners of that franchise.
Good stuff. Well, look, I did send you over some questions I wanted to cover. We probably don't have time to cover all of them. Unfortunately, I did think of one I wanted to ask you that I didn't send over, but I think it shouldn't be a difficult one for you. And it's just really to give you a background. Rangers history has been full of what you would call, the historical term great men, and great men have come in and made changes. I'm thinking of particularly, I don't know if you've heard of him, but Graham Souness, who was a Liverpool legend and came to be the manager of Rangers. He made what you would call a revolution, and not just Scottish football and British football and European football as a whole. And it really was based around his personality. So I wanted to ask you about Parag Marathi. Has he got that kind of personality that would bring a revolutionary type arrangement to Rangers and to football and Britain in general?
Well, they do have experience, and I think they're going to lean heavily on their experience with Leeds United. They've been involved with that for 6 years, and a couple of years, being the sole owners there. And Prague has done a job of, really kind of sinking himself into that situation. So, I know one thing, that they don't go into these things lightly, and they would have a very good grasp on the challenges that await. And I think that they would have a clear picture of where they want to go with it. And as I mentioned, I think part of what they've done with the 49ers when Parag Marathi kind of came in and took on a more active role with the 49ers, that was a proud franchise that was going through a rough time in the early 2000s. And, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but they've had some good seasons. They haven't won the Super Bowl since the York ownership and Parag Marathi have taken over, but it did give them the inspiration to go out and get Leeds, another franchise that had struggled, had seen better days, and looks like now they're in a pretty good position to get that promotion back to the Premier League. So I think what they see there is a really significant opportunity to put in place some of the practices that they did rebuilding the 49ers and rebuilding Leeds. So I think that they're going to really draw on that. And then I think what they've tried to do is kind of hone in on the importance of, they would know all the stuff behind the scenes. They would know the history of the Rangers and what they can tap into to try to recapture that glory. So now I think, they're smart people. So they would know, they would certainly have an idea of what direction they want to go. And I think in some instances, they would probably think outside the box and maybe do some stuff that's not as conventional.
Parag himself, when he walks in a room, and you have been in a room with him, does he command any kind of gravitas with his personality? Is he a quiet man? What's he like on a personal scale?
No, he's a very personable guy. He's just been very much out of the spotlight with the San Francisco 49ers. They basically turned that over to the head coach, Kyle Shanahan, the general manager, John Lynch. They're really, the football people are the ones who do the talking, and Prague is very much in the background. And I think he's kind of gone that way with Leeds United as well, trying to kind of pinpoint what they're looking for in a general manager or a coach, and then let them run the operation. So I don't know that my guess is if this occurs, as I think we all expect it to, that, Prague Mrate would have some kind of initial involvement as far as reaching out to the fan base, talking about the situation and the challenges that await this investment arm of the 49ers. But then I think when it comes down to the soccer part of it, he would stay out of the way, and you probably won't hear much from him from that standpoint. But he'll be very involved and very active in the day-to-day operations.
When it comes to the personality type of the people he puts in place, is he the kind of person that looks for someone who will challenge him when it comes to, opinions, and tell him if they think he's making a wrong move, or does he kind of like to have kind of placemen that do what he wants in place?
No, I think that they're about consensus building. Being around the football team, the American football team, there's not one person that's just making all the moves and this is what I believe and let's do it this way. They're very much about building the consensus. And with what Prague Mrate does is, he's the contract negotiator, the chief negotiator. They have other people who do that as well. But if the general manager and the coach want to go sign a player, he gets the reasons why. He does the research. He'll know how much that player, what the fair market value is, what a good price would be, and then he's the one that goes out and negotiates the deal. So I would suspect, I don't know how involved he would be in that, but I do know that there are certain analytical aspects of team building that they feel like they can kind of tap into with the football team, Leeds, and also I'm assuming Rangers too, to try to find the absolute best values and maybe get players who fit specific roles and that can help a team where a team might be deficient.
I might be simplifying what you're saying, Matt. That sounds like the film Moneyball. Would that be accurate?
There is a lot of that. That's very perceptive of you, Billy. Yeah, no, I think there is a lot of that. It's about, getting the most out of your dollar. And that very much is the case. And, in American football, teams have a salary cap. And so you got to kind of figure out where you want to spend your money. Really good players, you have to pay for them, but what kind of players can you get for lesser amounts that fit well within the team structure and give the team something that they don't otherwise have? So no, that is very much, I think, the case. And it's not, the 49ers spend money, the 49ers spend a lot of money. And so that's the one thing that in talking to people here, if this happens, just like with Leeds, I mean, they will spend money. They want to win. It's just a matter of, spending it in the right places and doing the right things in order to get that team back up to where it needs to be.
We definitely have a different way of buying and selling players in football that they do in American football. I can't get my head around the draft system at all, Matt. I'm sorry. It just seems so complicated how they buy and sell positions and things like that as well. So as much as I like watching it when it gets to the end of the Super Bowl kind of season and watching the playoffs and things, I'm not a true follower of NFL, but I'm aware that there is things like salary caps. We might have the same issue on two folds, actually. One, we won't be able to attract, Messi and Neymar to come to Rangers because of where the Scottish League is. So we are capped in some way that we can't get they couldn't just go out and buy anyone. But we're also capped by the financial fair play. Have you heard about the financial fair play rules? And if you have, would you trust that Parag and the people around them would know how to successfully navigate those rules?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the wrong person to talk to about that, but I can guarantee you that yes, the Prague and the people that are working with him on that side, I will say that, I mean, Prague's a very smart guy, and so he's going to sink, all of his energy into that. And I was with him for a game. It was a Leeds United game a couple of years ago. A game that started at 6 a.m. 6 in the morning our time, and watching him during the course of that game, it kind of showed to me that he is. I mean, he gets into it and he's passionate about it. Now, his passion isn't from years and years of fanship and knowing the team and having that as his team. It is, from the standpoint of having a vested interest in it. And, I do think that they are, they definitely try to do things that are in keeping with the traditions. I know just with Leeds United, there's been talk about, refurbishing the stadium or expanding the stadium of Ellen Road. And, they're very cognizant about making it a better fan experience while also not taking away from the charm and the tradition and the history of that stadium. So, I'm not sure what the whole situation is there as far as Ibrox Stadium and how much renovations or how much care it needs or any upgrades of that nature. But, I have seen it and it looks like a really great place to watch a game. And so anything that they do will be from, an investment standpoint of how can they generate more revenue for that franchise, but also not take away from any of the traditions and any of the charm that stadium has.
It really is a lovely stadium, Matt. You should go over one day if you can and see a game. Now,
I would love to.
You talked about Parag getting kind of up for these games. In a week's time, I think it's a week on Sunday, we do play Celtic at Ibrox, who are obviously our big rivals. I've never been to any of the other, the El Clasico, Barcelona, Real Madrid, or even Boca Juniors and River Plate in South America. But Rangers and Celtic is a pretty hostile atmosphere. If he's going to get, let's just say if this takeover goes through, hopefully in the next little while, and we're hearing rumours that it's very close, but I'm not going to push you if you've heard the same kind of thing, but we're hearing it could literally be over the next course of a week, but we'll wait and see about that. But he could find himself at that Rangers and Celtic game, and I think he will be in another world of, he won't have experienced anything like that, I don't think anyway. It's easy for me to say that because I'm a Rangers fan and we want it to be the best rivalry in the world, but it really is something different when you experience it. But anyway, that's just a side point. If I can bring you back to what the kind of, not rumors, but is there any kind of noise going around San Francisco, the 49ers, the club themselves, about this takeover? Is it making any waves in America at all?
The waves it makes is, give you a little bit of background here with the NFL and the salary cap. It's kind of a soft cap, meaning you can spend more in 1 year as long as you structure contracts a certain way. But then that money that hasn't counted against the cap ends up counting later. It's kind of like credit card spending. And the 49ers have spent a lot of money in recent years. They're one of the top one or two spending teams over the last 4 or 5 years. And so this year, when the offseason began and free agency opened, the 49ers cut back dramatically on their spending. And so a lot of people here, fans of the 49ers, were wondering if their cutback in spending had anything to do with them diversifying in the sports market, of owning Leeds United, of owning potentially down the road, Rangers. And what I was told, and I asked Jed York, the owner, the CEO of the 49ers, about that. And he just said that, those things, they're completely separate. Leeds United and potentially Rangers will be completely separate from the 49ers. But what he did say was that, they want to bring their brands together, somehow incorporate, marketing with the 49ers and Leeds and, again, potentially Rangers. I think we all expect that to happen, right? And so that's the kind of thing. And also kind of taking their best practices in operating the football team, the American football team with the other teams. But the financials don't overlap. So any of the criticism or any of the backlash tied to the 49ers reported involvement has been more about how it'll impact the San Francisco 49ers. Now, there's been some other cultural stuff with, I probably don't want to get into it too much, but, we all know some of the stuff that happens, and as far as the chants and everything like that. Some people here have reached out to me about that. What would be the 49ers stance in dealing with some of this stuff, some of the more, and I realize it's a small minority, but some of the, shall we say, unsavory things that are tied there. So I don't see that the 49ers themselves, that would be any kind of deterrent for them to invest in this situation. And I think that they would just do the best they can of handling any situations and try to be proactive and try to, address things and do the best they can to keep kind of those outside influences and, maybe some of the less attractive things kind of tamped down as best they can.
I mean, there's no getting away from it. The club have had some fines from UEFA recently due to what a section of the crowd, and not particularly supported by the rest of the crowd, I would say. So I think you're right when you say that sometimes a minority can kind of ruin it for everyone else. So there's no getting away from that. I think the club, though, have worked well, certainly recently, in trying to overcome those problems. And again, hopefully it's not something that would ever come up to be a major red flag for the organisation investing in it. And I really don't think it is. It's certainly not the problem, Matt, that we had maybe historically, not just with Rangers, but with clubs all over, I think Scotland and England, Europe as well, to be fair. But in Scotland, it's more of a religious thing rather than a football hatred. So yeah. It's a bit of a powder keg sometimes, but it's nowhere near as bad as even when I was at school. It's nowhere near as bad as even that now, I would say.
Yeah, and I think there is certainly the thought that as people become more educated, more aware, that stuff hopefully will just kind of dissipate and maybe at some point disappear over time.
Matt, you did say you hopefully we could get 20 minutes of your time, and we're sitting at 17, so I don't want to push you. But there was one, and I'm not going through my questions like I didn't think I would, so thank you for coming on anyway. But I did want to ask you, just purely because you work in the media side yourself, and I'm assuming over the last 10 years or so, you'll have seen massive changes in the way that people consume sport news, sport media, whether it comes to videos like this that we do on YouTube or podcasts on podcast apps. I'm sure you maybe do things like that yourself with your own organisation. How do you feel that the 49ers and Prague himself have, opened the doors to fan media as a whole? Are they welcoming to fan media? Are they supportive of it? Or do they still kind of go down the same road of just talking to the main, news outlets?
Jed York doesn't talk publicly too often. He did recently. He does once a year. It's at the NFL annual meeting, where every owner, every general manager, and every head coach, they come together. And this year is in Florida, in Palm Beach, Florida. And so I was able to spend a lot of time with him there. And I can tell you that he definitely has his ideas about how to grow the brand. And I would think that those, I think that's what he was talking about when he's talking about the best practices of learning from the NFL side and learning from Leeds United, what they've done there, and carrying over some of those. And I know it's not always apples and apples, but there are, certain crossover sections where they can see what the NFL has done and been very successful, and his own beliefs and where the NFL should go as far as social media or streaming or whatever the case may be, just to maximize the revenue streams and to put it back into the football side of it. So I can tell you, he certainly has his opinions. He's a very opinionated person as far as running the franchise and looking at the NFL model and seeing both the stuff that he appreciates and respects and admires, but also the areas where he sees room to grow too. So I think, I don't know what kind of restrictions there would be as far as from a league standpoint or anything like that. But I think the 49ers would be very aggressive in pursuing the avenues where they feel like they can maximize profits, but also sink those profits back into creating a winning franchise.
It was more along the lines of opening like the club up to, and I don't mean regular interviews, but access to players, access to management teams or coaches on, from people like ourselves who aren't, the NBC or aren't the big kind of news corporations. Is that something they currently allow, or is that not really something on the cards for them?
I think that they would have to see. I think that might be kind of, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or, whatever the traditions are. I certainly don't think that they would be adverse to that. Here's what I can tell you too, is that, they have placed a tremendous emphasis with the 49ers. And I think also with Leeds, as far as getting their players out there in the public and doing charity work, philanthropic work. And so I know that's different than what you're asking, but if you're asking, would players be available, to come on and talk? I would say, I certainly would not rule that out. I think that they understand that there is there are benefits to having, the faces of their team, the franchise, to be out there and kind of humanize the players, because I think, anyone who walks into a stadium, if you've seen someone out there on the pitch that you've seen out there in real life and you feel a connection to, I think you feel a greater and stronger connection to the team as well.
Matt, thank you very much for talking to me today, and thank you for the time you've given me. Please, can you just let people know where they can find you, whether it's on Twitter or online anywhere, if anybody wanted to reach out to you or give you a thumbs up?
All right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I do have a YouTube channel. It's Matt Maiocco. You see the name spelled there on your screen, Matt Maiocco NFL, where I talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Also on all social media, I'm at Maiocco, MAIOCCO, NBCS, and that means NBC Sports. So, Billy, thank you so much for having me on. I've enjoyed it, and I'm sure my feeling is that there will be some developments here in the very near future, in the next month or two, and maybe we'll have more to talk about down the road.
Good stuff, Matt. Well, thank you very much again for coming on. I'll just finish up the pod by saying, please, if you want to visit our sponsor, which is offtothematchigo.co.uk, and use the code Journal10, you do get 10% off all their products over there. So please check them out. Thank you everyone for listening. You can follow us on all the social medias, as Matt was saying, Twitter at Rangers Journal. You can also catch us in the podcast apps like Spotify and Apple, various ones like that. And of course, where you're watching this on YouTube or maybe even Twitter at the moment. So thank you, Matt. Thank you everyone for watching. And remember, every night is a Rangers Journal night. Good night.